The day before my daughter's wedding, her fiancé smiled. "You know what would be the perfect gift? You disappearing from our lives forever." So I granted his wish. I sold the house they thought was their wedding gift and left an envelope at every guest's table. What was inside, he'll never forget. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. The crystal chandelier cast rainbow prisms across the rehearsal dinner as I watched my daughter Sarah practice her vows. 25 years of life, and she'd never looked more radiant. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her blue eyes sparkling with joy that should have warmed my heart. Instead, I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach as Brad, her fiancé, whispered something in her ear that made her giggle and glanced dismissively in my direction. "Mrs. Henderson." Brad approached me with that practiced smile I'd learned to distrust over the past year. "Could I speak with you privately for a moment?" I followed him to the empty library, my heels clicking against the hardwood floors. The room smelled of old books and expensive furniture polish. Brad closed the door behind us, and his smile disappeared like it had been wiped away with a cloth. "Listen, Margaret," he said, dropping the respectful pretense he usually maintained around Sarah. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation about tomorrow." "What about tomorrow?" I asked, though something in his tone made my pulse quicken. Brad straightened his tie, a nervous habit I'd noticed whenever he was about to lie. "Well, you know Sarah and I have been talking about our future, our plans as a married couple." "Of course, that's natural. The thing is," he continued, moving to pour himself a brandy from Robert's collection, "we've decided we want to start fresh. New life, new priorities. Clean slate, if you know what I mean." I didn't, but I sensed I was about to learn. "I'm afraid I don't follow, Brad." He took a long sip and turned to face me fully. "We don't want you in our lives anymore, Margaret. After tomorrow, we think it would be best if you just disappeared. Permanently." The words hung in the air like smoke. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "Excuse me? Look, I'll be direct since you seem confused." His voice took on a condescending edge. "Sarah agrees with me that you're too involved in our relationship, too controlling, too present. We want to build our marriage without constant interference from an overbearing mother-in-law." My hands began to shake, but I kept my voice steady. "Sarah agreed to this?" It was actually her idea. Brad's smile returned, cruel and satisfied. "She's just too polite to tell you herself." "But me? I have no problem being honest. You know what would be the perfect wedding gift? You disappearing from our lives forever." The library walls seemed to close in around me. This boy, because that's what he was, a spoiled 28-year-old boy, had just asked me to erase myself from my daughter's life as a wedding present. "And if I refuse?" I whispered. Brad shrugged casually. "Then Sarah will have to choose between her husband and her mother. And frankly, Mrs. Henderson, I don't think you'll like how that turns out." He drained his brandy glass and headed for the door. "Think about it tonight. Make the right choice tomorrow." As the door closed behind him, I remained standing in that library, surrounded by leather-bound books that had witnessed decades of family conversations. None quite like this one. My reflection stared back at me from the dark window. A 52-year-old woman who had just been told she was unwanted by the child she'd raised alone for the past 15 years. But what Brad didn't know was that I'd been making difficult choices my entire life, and this one was about to be easier than he could possibly imagine. Chapter 2. 24 hours earlier, I'd been the proud mother of the bride, checking final details for what I thought would be the happiest day of my daughter's life. Now I stood in my kitchen at 3 a.m., staring at the deed to the lake house that Sarah had been coveting since childhood. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. The house had been my retirement dream, purchased with the life insurance money from Robert's passing 3 years ago. Sarah knew I'd planned to give it to her and Brad as a wedding gift. She'd been showing it off to her friends for months, posting pictures on social media with captions like, "Future weekend getaway," and "Can't wait to make memories here with my husband." What she didn't know was that the deed was still in my name only. I poured myself a cup of coffee and opened my laptop. If Brad wanted me to disappear, I could arrange that, but I'd do it on my terms. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I composed an email to Janet Morrison, the real estate agent who'd helped me buy the lake house. Janet, I need to list the property immediately. Yes, I know it's unusual timing. Price it to sell fast. I'll explain later. Send. One click, and Brad's perfect wedding gift vanished into cyberspace. Next, I opened my contact list and began making calls. First to the caterer. Helen, it's Margaret Henderson. I need to make a change to tomorrow's reception. I glanced at the clock. I know it's late, but this is important. Helen Barnes had been catering events in our town for 30 years. She'd handled my own wedding reception when I was younger than Sarah was now. Margaret, honey, the wedding is tomorrow. What kind of change could possibly need to be made at this hour? I need you to place a small envelope at each table setting. White envelope, nothing fancy. I'll bring them to you first thing in the morning. Envelopes? What's in them? I smiled for the first time since Brad's little speech. Wedding favors, Helen. Very personal wedding favors. After hanging up with Helen, I made similar calls to the florist, the photographer, and the string quartet. Each conversation was brief, professional, and completely normal. Nobody questioned the mother of the bride making last-minute adjustments. That was expected behavior after all. By 4 a.m., my phone was buzzing with text messages from the real estate agent. Margaret, I've already had 3 inquiries. The lake house market is hot right now. I can have offers by noon if you're serious about this. I was serious about everything now. The envelope I was preparing for Sarah's table would be different from the others. Hers would contain the real estate listing printout, showing the lake house sold to strangers for cash. The others would contain something much more interesting. I'd spent years listening to Brad's stories at family dinners. Stories he thought made him sound charming and successful. Stories about his business ventures that never quite materialized. Stories about the money his trust fund provided monthly. Stories about his father's law firm, where Brad supposedly worked but never seemed to accomplish much. What Brad didn't realize was that his stories contained enough details for someone with time and motivation to verify them. And for the past 6 months, ever since I'd begun sensing something wasn't right about my future son-in-law, I'd been doing exactly that. The trust fund? Suspended 2 years ago for what his father's lawyer diplomatically called irresponsible spending patterns. The job at Daddy's firm? More like an allowance for showing up occasionally and pretending to review cases. The business ventures? Elaborate cons he'd been running on various investors, including Sarah's college friends. Brad Mitchell wasn't just broke. He was a fraud. And tomorrow, every single wedding guest would learn exactly what kind of man Sarah was marrying. I sealed the last envelope and placed it with the others in a neat stack. 67 envelopes for 67 guests, each containing a detailed background report on Bradford James Mitchell III, complete with financial records, police reports, and testimonials from his previous victims. The sun was beginning to rise as I showered and dressed for my daughter's wedding day. In a few hours, Brad would get his wish. I would disappear from their lives forever. But not quietly. Chapter 3. The morning of Sarah's wedding dawned crisp and clear, the kind of October day that makes photographers swoon. I arrived at the venue early, carrying a simple white box containing 67 envelopes that would soon turn this fairy tale wedding into the scandal of the century. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Helen Barnes met me at the service entrance, coffee in hand and curiosity written across her weathered face. Margaret, I've been in this business for 3 decades, and I've never had a mother of the bride bring mysterious envelopes at dawn. You're making me nervous. Trust me, Helen. Today's reception will be memorable. I handed her the box, noting how her eyebrows rose at the weight. 1 envelope per table setting, exactly as I described. And if guests ask me what's inside, they won't ask you. They'll be too busy reading. I pulled out my phone to check for messages from Janet. 3 offers already, all above asking price. The lake house would be gone before the ceremony ended. Helen shook her head but took the box. Your daughter's going to kill me if this ruins her day. My daughter made her choice, I replied. She'll have to live with the consequences. I spent the next 2 hours at the salon, getting my hair and makeup done alongside Sarah and her bridesmaids. The atmosphere was giddy, champagne flowing freely as the girls chatted about the reception, the honeymoon, the future. Sarah looked radiant in her white silk robe, diamond earrings catching the morning light. "Mom, I'm so nervous," she confided as the makeup artist applied her lipstick. "What if something goes wrong?" I squeezed her hand, feeling a pang of sadness for what was about to happen. "Sweetheart, sometimes things go wrong for a reason. Sometimes it's the universe's way of protecting us from bigger mistakes." Sarah laughed. "You're so philosophical today. Save some wisdom for your mother of the bride speech tonight." "About that," I said carefully. "I don't think I'll be giving a speech after all." "What? Mom, you've been working on that speech for months." "Plans change, honey. You'll understand soon enough." The ceremony took place at 4 p.m. in the rose garden behind the country club. Sarah walked down the aisle on my brother Tom's arm, since her father wasn't alive to give her away. She was breathtaking in her grandmother's vintage lace dress, veil flowing behind her like a cloud. For a moment, watching her approach the altar, I almost wavered. Then I saw Brad smile. That same practiced, empty smile he'd given me in the library. The smile of a predator who thought he'd won. The minister began the traditional words. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." But I found myself thinking different words. "Dearly deceived, we are gathered here to witness the union of a naive young woman and a con artist." When the minister asked if anyone objected to this union, I remained silent. The truth would speak for itself soon enough. "You may kiss the bride," the minister announced, and Brad swept Sarah into his arms for a passionate kiss that earned applause from the assembled guests. As they walked back down the aisle together, Sarah caught my eye and blew me a kiss. I smiled and waved back, knowing it might be the last time she'd look at me with love instead of hatred. The cocktail hour passed in a blur of congratulations and small talk. Guests mingled on the terrace, admiring the view of the lake where my former house sat empty, already sold to strangers. I made polite conversation with relatives and family friends, accepting their compliments on the beautiful ceremony and elegant reception. "Margaret, you must be so proud," gushed Aunt Dorothy. "Sarah looks absolutely radiant, and Brad seems like such a catch." "He certainly caught something," I murmured, watching the waiters begin seating guests for dinner. At 6:30, the dinner bell chimed, and guests made their way to their assigned tables. Each place setting included Helen's beautiful floral arrangements, polished silverware, and one small white envelope bearing the guest's name. I took my seat at the head table, directly across from Sarah and Brad. The happy couple was busy accepting congratulations and posing for photos, completely oblivious to what was about to unfold. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC announced, "before we begin dinner, the bride's mother has asked me to suggest that you open the small gift waiting at your place setting. A personal message from the Henderson family to thank you for sharing this special day." 67 hands reached for 67 envelopes simultaneously, and my daughter's perfect wedding day began to implode. Chapter 4. The first gasp came from table 3, where Brad's college fraternity brothers were seated. Then a sharp intake of breath from table 5, where Sarah's sorority sisters had been giggling about wedding favors just moments before. By the time the contents of the envelopes had been fully absorbed, the reception hall had fallen into the kind of silence usually reserved for funerals. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Brad noticed the change in atmosphere before Sarah did. His head swiveled around the room, taking in the shocked faces, the whispered conversations, the way people were staring at him with expressions ranging from disgust to pity. When his gaze finally landed on me, I raised my champagne glass in a mock toast. "Mom?" Sarah's voice was uncertain. "What's happening?" Everyone looked so strange. I watched as Brad's fraternity brother Mike stood up from table 3, envelope in hand, and began walking toward our table. His face was flushed with anger, jaw clenched tight. Behind him, other guests were starting to murmur, the kind of low building rumble that precedes a thunderstorm. "Bradford," Mike said when he reached us, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "We need to talk, now." "Mike, hey buddy, what's wrong?" Brad's voice cracked slightly, but he maintained his smile. "Can it wait? Kind of in the middle of my wedding here." Mike held up the paper he'd pulled from his envelope. "According to this, you owe me $12,000 from that investment opportunity you pitched last Christmas. The one where you said you'd triple my money in 6 months. Sarah's face paled. What investment opportunity? Before Brad could answer, another voice called out from table 7. He owes me $8,000. It was Jennifer Walsh, one of Sarah's college friends. For the wedding photography business we were supposedly starting together. Then table 4. $15,000 for the restaurant franchise that never existed. Table 8. $6,000 for cryptocurrency mining equipment that was just an empty warehouse. The voices multiplied. A crescendo of anger and betrayal as Brad's victims stood up one by one, clutching their envelopes like evidence in a courtroom drama. Sarah spun in her chair, trying to process what she was hearing, her white dress rustling with each frantic movement. "This is insane," Brad said, his practiced composure finally cracking. "Margaret, what have you done?" "I granted your wish," I replied calmly, cutting into my salmon as if nothing unusual was happening. "You wanted me to disappear from your lives, so I'm taking my resources with me, including the lake house you thought you were inheriting." Sarah gasped. "The lake house? Mom, what are you talking about?" I reached into my purse and pulled out a copy of the real estate listing, placing it in front of her. "Sold this morning. Cash offer, above asking price. The new owners take possession Monday." "You sold our wedding gift?" Sarah's voice rose to a near shriek. "How could you do that?" "It was never your wedding gift. Sweetheart, it was my house, my decision." I turned to face her fully. "Just like it was your decision to ask me to disappear from your life." Confusion flickered across Sarah's features. "I never asked you to disappear. What are you talking about?" Before I could answer, Brad grabbed Sarah's arm. "We need to leave, now. This is obviously some kind of breakdown, and we don't have to sit here and be humiliated." But Sarah shook him off, her eyes locked on mine. "Mom, explain this. Explain all of this." I glanced around the room, where 67 wedding guests were now holding documented proof of Brad's criminal activity. Some were on their phones, probably calling lawyers or police. Others were comparing notes, realizing how extensively they'd been manipulated. "Last night," I said quietly, "your fiancé told me that the perfect wedding gift would be my permanent disappearance from your lives. He said it was actually your idea, Sarah, that you were too polite to tell me yourself." Sarah's face went white. "That's not true. I never said that." I watched as the realization hit her. The betrayal wasn't just financial. Brad had been playing us against each other, isolating her from the one person who might have protected her from his schemes. "Tell her, Brad," I said. "Tell my daughter exactly what you said to me in the library last night." But Brad was no longer listening. He was backing away from our table, his face flushed with panic, as more guests approached with their envelopes, demanding answers and restitution. "This is harassment," he said loudly. "My father's law firm will be in touch about this libel." That's when elderly Judge Morrison from Table 9 stood up, his voice booming across the reception hall. "Your father's law firm disowned you 18 months ago for embezzlement, son. It's all right here in black and white." The room erupted in gasps and angry murmurs. Sarah buried her face in her hands, her perfect wedding day collapsing around her like a house of cards. And I sat there, calmly finishing my dinner, watching the man who'd tried to erase me from my daughter's life get exactly what he deserved. Chapter 5. The reception hall looked like a crime scene by 8 p.m. Police had arrived after 3 guests called to report fraud. Wedding cake sat untouched, while investigators took statements, and Sarah's beautiful white dress was stained with tears and mascara. My daughter sat hunched in her chair, staring at the evidence spread across our table like she was seeing it for the first time. "Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button." "Mrs. Henderson, we'll need to speak with you as well," Detective Morrison said, approaching our table with a notebook in hand. He was Judge Morrison's nephew and had been watching the evening's revelations with professional interest. "Of course, Detective, though I think you'll find I'm more of a witness than a suspect." Sarah finally looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed and confused. "Mom, how long have you known about this?" I set down my coffee cup and chose my words carefully. "I started having concerns about 6 months ago. Little inconsistencies in Brad's stories, references to business deals that didn't add up. So I did what any mother would do. I investigated." "You investigated my fiancé?" "I protected my daughter. I pulled out a manila folder I'd kept hidden in my purse all evening. 6 months of private investigator reports, financial records, and police documentation. Brad Mitchell isn't just broke, Sarah. He's been running cons since college. Detective Morrison examined the folder contents, his eyebrows rising with each page. This is quite thorough, Mrs. Henderson. Professional-grade investigation. I hired the best. Money well spent, as it turns out. Sarah grabbed the folder, scanning the documents with growing horror. A restraining order from his ex-girlfriend. Theft charges that were dropped. Mom, why didn't you tell me? I tried to, sweetheart. Remember our lunch last month when I suggested a longer engagement? Or when I recommended that premarital financial counseling? Every time I raised concerns, you defended him. You said I was being overprotective. But you could have just shown me this evidence. I laughed bitterly. Could I? You've been so infatuated with Brad that you stopped returning my calls half the time. When's the last time we had a real conversation, Sarah? One where you didn't cut me off to take his phone call or rush off to meet him. Sarah opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. We both knew I was right. The night before your wedding, I continued, Brad made his position crystal clear. He wanted me gone. Not just distant, completely erased from your lives. He said it was your idea. It wasn't, Sarah whispered. I swear, Mom, I never said that. I know that now. But last night, I believed him. I believed that my own daughter wanted me to disappear. I felt tears threatening for the first time all day. Do you have any idea what that felt like? Before Sarah could answer, a commotion erupted near the exit. Brad was trying to leave with his groomsmen, but several guests had formed a human barrier. Mike from table 3 was still clutching his envelope, his face red with fury. You're not going anywhere until we figure out how to get our money back, Mike declared. Some of us are talking about a class action lawsuit. This is kidnapping, Brad protested, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. You can't force me to stay here. Actually, Detective Morrison interjected, approaching the group, I can. Bradford Mitchell, you're under arrest for fraud and conspiracy to commit theft. The Miranda rights were read in front of 67 wedding guests, the string quartet, and 3 very confused catering staff. Brad's face went through a rainbow of emotions: shock, anger, fear, and finally a desperate calculation as he searched the room for some escape route. His eyes landed on Sarah, still sitting in her ruined wedding dress, and for a moment his mask slipped completely. Instead of love, or even regret, I saw something cold and predatory. This wasn't the face of a man who'd lost the love of his life. This was the face of a con artist whose mark had finally wised up. Sarah, he called out as the handcuffs clicked into place. This is all a misunderstanding. Your mother is obviously having some kind of breakdown. Don't let her poison you against me. Sarah stood up slowly, her hands shaking as she smoothed her wedding dress. When she spoke, her voice was stronger than I'd heard it in months. Brad, did you tell my mother that I wanted her to disappear from our lives? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Brad's lawyer training kicked in, and he opened his mouth to deflect, to spin, to manipulate the situation one last time. But Sarah held up her hand, stopping him. Don't. For once in our relationship, just tell me the truth. Brad looked around the room, calculating odds and possibilities, then apparently decided the truth was his only remaining play. Yes, I said that. But Sarah, you have to understand. She was interfering with our relationship. We needed space to build our marriage without her constant involvement. Constant involvement like paying for this wedding? Like giving us the lake house? Like the monthly checks you asked me to request from her when your trust fund got cut off? The room went silent again. This was news even to me. Brad's face flushed. That was temporary, just until my legal situation with my father got resolved. What legal situation? Sarah's voice was deadly quiet now. Detective Morrison consulted his notes. Your fiancé is being sued by his father's firm for embezzling client funds. The trust fund was frozen pending criminal investigation. Sarah looked from Brad to me to the detective, pieces of a puzzle finally falling into place. So, the money I've been asking my mother for, that was to support you. It was to support us, Brad corrected desperately. Our future together. But Sarah was no longer listening. She was staring at the engagement ring on her finger, a 2-carat diamond that I now realized had probably been purchased with money I'd unknowingly provided. Get him out of here, she said quietly. As Detective Morrison led Brad away, my daughter turned to face me with tears streaming down her cheeks. The reception hall was still full of wedding guests, but for that moment, it felt like we were completely alone. "Mom," she whispered, "I am so sorry." Chapter 6. The cleanup after Sarah's destroyed wedding took 3 hours and involved 2 police cars, 1 very confused wedding planner, and 47 guests demanding to know if they should still expect thank you cards. By 11 p.m., my daughter and I were sitting alone in the empty reception hall, both of us still in our formal wear, sharing a bottle of wine from what should have been her honeymoon champagne collection. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. "I can't believe I was so stupid," Sarah said for the dozenth time, staring at her engagement ring like it might spontaneously combust. "All those red flags, and I just ignored them." "You weren't stupid, sweetheart. You were in love, or what you thought was love." I refilled both our glasses, noting how the elegant reception hall looked like a hurricane had blown through it. Brad is good at what he does. Manipulation is a skill, and he's had years to perfect it. Sarah finally pulled off the engagement ring and set it on the table between us. "How much money did I give him? Through the requests I made to you?" I'd been dreading this question all evening. "Over the past 8 months? About $37,000? Sarah's face crumpled. "Oh God, Mom, I'm so sorry. How can I ever pay you back?" "You don't need to pay me back. That money was spent protecting you, even if neither of us realized it at the time." I reached across the table and took her hand. "But I need you to understand something, Sarah. This isn't just about the money. I know you must hate me for choosing him over you. I don't hate you. I'm disappointed in how easily you let him drive a wedge between us. But I don't hate you." I squeezed her fingers gently. "What concerns me is how you lost yourself in that relationship. The Sarah I raised wouldn't have ignored her instincts the way you did." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing this. "When did it start, do you think? When did I stop being me?" I thought about the past 2 years, watching my confident, independent daughter gradually transform into someone who second-guessed every decision, who constantly sought Brad's approval, who had slowly but surely distanced herself from everyone who cared about her. "Remember your promotion at the marketing firm last year, when you got the corner office and the raise?" "Yeah, I was so excited to tell you about it." "And what happened when you told Brad?" Sarah's face darkened as she remembered. "He said I was getting too ambitious, that focusing too much on my career would hurt our relationship. He wanted me to turn down the promotion." "Which you did." "Which I did," she confirmed miserably. "And I told myself it was a compromise. That marriage meant making sacrifices for each other." "But did Brad ever sacrifice anything for you?" Sarah considered this, then shook her head slowly. "No. Every compromise was mine to make. Every adjustment was my responsibility. When I think about it now, God, I don't even recognize the person I became." The janitor appeared to start cleaning up, so we moved our conversation to the parking lot, sitting on the steps outside the country club. The October air was crisp, and Sarah shivered in her sleeveless dress. I draped my shawl around her shoulders, a gesture that reminded me of when she was small and we'd sit outside together looking at stars. "Mom, can I ask you something that might sound strange?" "After today, I don't think anything would sound strange. Are you happy this happened? I mean, I know today was horrible, but are you relieved that Brad is out of our lives?" I considered the question carefully. "I'm relieved that you're safe from him. I'm sorry that you had to be humiliated in front of everyone you care about to discover the truth. But am I glad he's gone?" "Yes, sweetheart, I am." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "I think I am too." "Is that terrible? Shouldn't I be heartbroken?" "The fact that you're not heartbroken tells you everything you need to know about what kind of relationship you were really in." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the last of the catering trucks drive away. Tomorrow the country club would host another event, and this night would become just another story in their collection of wedding disasters. "What happens now?" Sarah finally asked. "I mean practically. I gave notice on my apartment because we were supposed to move in together. All my stuff is at his place. I don't even have anywhere to live. You'll come home, of course. Your room is exactly as you left it." "Are you sure? After everything I put you through, after choosing him over you so many times?" I turned to look at my daughter fully. Even with smudged makeup and a wrinkled wedding dress, she was beautiful. But more importantly, for the first time in months, she looked like herself again. The uncertainty was gone, replaced by something I hadn't seen in her eyes since Brad entered our lives. Clarity. Sarah, you're my daughter. There is nothing you could do that would make me stop loving you. Nothing you could say that would make me turn my back on you. That's what real love looks like. It doesn't come with conditions or ultimatums. Sarah started crying again, but these tears were different. Not the desperate, panicked tears from earlier, but something softer. Relief, maybe, or recognition. I love you too, Mom, and I promise I will never let anyone come between us again. As I drove us home through the quiet streets of our small town, I found myself thinking about the private investigator I'd hired 6 months ago. His name was David Chen, and he'd done thorough professional work documenting Brad's criminal activities. But there was something else he'd discovered, something I hadn't included in tonight's envelopes because it was still speculation rather than fact. Brad Mitchell wasn't working alone. He had a partner, someone helping him identify and target vulnerable young women from wealthy families. Someone who knew enough about his victims' backgrounds to help him craft the perfect persona for each new conquest. And according to David's preliminary investigation, Brad's next target had already been selected. Tomorrow, I'd be making some phone calls to warn another mother about the charming young man her daughter had recently started dating. Tonight, though, I was just grateful to have my own daughter back. Chapter 7. Sunday morning brought coffee, aspirin, and the surreal experience of explaining to my extended family why their gift checks should be canceled before Brad could cash them. Sarah sat at the kitchen table in my old bathrobe, fielding calls from friends who'd heard about the wedding disaster through social media and wanted to make sure she was okay. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Cousin Beth wants to know if the China pattern is still available for purchase, Sarah said, after hanging up from her latest call. Apparently, the humiliation of public fraud doesn't affect her gift-giving timeline. I laughed despite everything. Your father's side of the family always did have interesting priorities. We were interrupted by a knock at the door. Through the window, I could see David Chen, the private investigator I'd hired, holding a manila folder and looking unusually grim. Mrs. Henderson? I have some additional information about Brad Mitchell that I think you and your daughter should see. I invited him in, pouring coffee, while Sarah clutched her robe tighter around herself. David had been invaluable over the past 6 months, methodically documenting Brad's financial crimes and romantic deceptions. He was a former police detective who'd gone private after 30 years on the force, specializing in cases involving financial fraud and elder abuse. First, congratulations on last night, David said, accepting the coffee gratefully. I heard through my contacts that Mitchell was arrested and charged. Your envelope strategy was brilliant. It felt necessary, I replied. But you said you had additional information? David opened his folder and spread several photographs across the kitchen table. These were taken yesterday before the wedding. I've been maintaining surveillance on Mitchell's activities, and I discovered something troubling. The photos showed Brad in what appeared to be a hotel room, talking animatedly with an older woman I didn't recognize. She was well-dressed, professional-looking, with silver hair and an expensive handbag. Who is that? Sarah asked, leaning forward to study the images. Her name is Victoria Ashworth. She's 58 years old, recently widowed, and according to my sources, she's worth approximately $4 million in life insurance and inherited assets. My blood ran cold. He was already planning his next victim. It gets worse, David continued, pulling out more documents. Victoria Ashworth has a daughter, 26 years old, works as a teacher, recently ended a long-term relationship. The daughter's name is Emma, and based on these photos from her social media accounts, she's been dating someone new for the past 2 months. He showed us a series of Instagram photos. Emma Ashworth, with a handsome young man at various romantic locations around the city. Dinner at expensive restaurants, weekend getaways, couples photos with captions about new love and fresh starts. Sarah gasped. That's not Brad in the photos. No, it's his business partner, Tyler Reynolds, age 30, similar background of fraud and manipulation. They work as a team. One targets the daughter, the other eventually targets the mother. They've been running this particular con for almost 3 years. I stared at the evidence spread across my kitchen table, feeling sick. They're professional predators. The worst kind, David confirmed. They identify recently divorced or widowed women with adult daughters, then split up to work both targets simultaneously. The daughter provides access and information about the mother's finances, usually without realizing it. Meanwhile, the mother is gradually isolated from friends and family who might interfere. Sarah had gone pale. That's exactly what Brad was doing to us, separating me from you, making me feel like I had to choose between you and him. It's a classic manipulation tactic. But here's the thing. Mitchell getting arrested last night doesn't stop Reynolds from continuing to work on Emma Ashworth. If anything, it might accelerate his timeline. I stood up and began pacing the kitchen, my mind racing. We have to warn them. That's what I was hoping you'd say, David replied. But we need to be strategic about it. If we approach Emma directly, Reynolds will likely disappear and surface somewhere else with new identities. We need evidence of criminal activity, not just suspicious behavior. What do you need from us? Sarah asked. David pulled out a business card and handed it to me. Victoria Ashworth belongs to the same country club where your wedding reception was held. Same social circles, same charitable organizations. If you could arrange an introduction, we might be able to gather enough evidence to stop them before Emma gets in too deep. I looked at the card, then at my daughter. Sarah, how do you feel about helping another family avoid what we just went through? I'm in, she said without hesitation. No one else should have to experience what we did yesterday. David gathered his photos and documents. I'll continue surveillance on Reynolds while you make contact with Mrs. Ashworth. But be careful. If they suspect we're onto them, they could become dangerous. After he left, Sarah and I sat in the kitchen, processing what we'd learned. The man who'd tried to destroy our relationship wasn't just a common criminal. He was part of an organized operation targeting vulnerable families. Mom, Sarah said quietly, I keep thinking about something Brad said yesterday when he was being arrested. He looked around the room like he was calculating something, like he was already planning his next move. What do you mean? I think he was memorizing faces, guest list, addresses, contact information. Everyone at that wedding is now a potential target for whatever comes next. The realization hit me like ice water. The envelopes I'd used to expose Brad's crimes had also provided him with a detailed map of our family's social network. Every person at that wedding reception was now vulnerable to retaliation or recruitment. I reached for my phone. We need to call Detective Morrison. And then we need to start making some very important phone calls to warn people. As I dialed the detective's number, I found myself thinking about the irony of the situation. 24 hours ago, I'd been a mother trying to protect her daughter from a dangerous man. Now, I was apparently leading a campaign to protect an entire community from a criminal network. But if that's what it took to keep other families safe, then that's exactly what I was going to do. Chapter 8. Monday morning found me in the most unlikely place imaginable. The visitor's room at the county jail, sitting across from Brad Mitchell and trying not to let my disgust show on my face. Detective Morrison had arranged the meeting after I'd explained David Chen's discoveries about the criminal partnership with Tyler Reynolds. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Margaret, Brad said, offering that familiar smile as he settled into the plastic chair. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of his expensive suits, but his confidence remained intact. I have to say, I'm surprised you wanted to see me. I'm full of surprises, I replied, studying his face for any crack in the facade. How are you adjusting to jail food? It's temporary. My lawyer says the charges won't stick. Too much circumstantial evidence, not enough direct proof. Brad leaned forward conspiratorially. Besides, most of those people at your little wedding disaster got their money back. Insurance fraud, you know. They're probably thanking me by now. I kept my expression neutral, though internally I was taking notes. Brad clearly didn't know that David Chen had spent months documenting his crimes with bank records and recorded conversations. The evidence wasn't circumstantial at all. That's interesting, I said. What about Tyler Reynolds? Is he helping with your legal defense? For just a moment, Brad's smile faltered. It was subtle, a slight tightening around his eyes, but it confirmed what I'd suspected. He hadn't expected me to know about his partner. I'm not sure who you mean, he said carefully. Of course you do, Brad. Tall, dark hair, works the daughter while you work the mother? Currently dating Emma Ashworth while you were supposed to be targeting her mother, Victoria? Brad's mask slipped completely. The charming facade disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. You've been busy. Margaret, but you're playing a dangerous game. Am I? Because from where I sit, you're the one in the orange jumpsuit. This is temporary, he repeated, but his voice carried an edge now. And when I get out, I'll remember who tried to interfere with my business. I leaned back in my chair, genuinely amused. Are you threatening me, Brad? Because that seems unwise, considering I'm wearing a wire and this conversation is being recorded. Brad's eyes widened, and he instinctively looked around the visitor's room as if searching for hidden cameras. Detective Morrison had indeed wired me for this conversation, hoping Brad would incriminate himself further or provide information about Reynolds' activities. Relax, I said, enjoying his discomfort. I'm not here to trap you into additional charges. I'm here to offer you a deal. What kind of deal? I pulled out a manila folder, similar to the ones I'd distributed at the wedding reception. Complete information about Tyler Reynolds' operation, his real name, his targets, his methods, his criminal history, everything needed to stop him before he destroys another family. Brad stared at the folder but didn't reach for it. And in exchange for this information, what do you want? I want you to disappear. Brad, permanently. No more cons, no more targeting vulnerable women, no more destroying families for profit. Take whatever plea deal the prosecutor offers, serve your time quietly, and when you get out, find a legitimate way to make a living. And if I refuse? I opened the folder and showed him the first page, a detailed timeline of his criminal activities going back 7 years, including several cases that had never been prosecuted. Then this information goes to every law enforcement agency in the country, along with your photograph and complete criminal profile. You'll never be able to run another con because every potential victim will have been warned about you. Brad studied the documents with growing alarm. Where did you get this? I told you, I'm full of surprises. Professional investigation services can uncover remarkable things when properly motivated. I closed the folder and placed it back in front of me. So what's it going to be, Brad? Cooperation and a chance to start over? Or a lifetime of looking over your shoulder? For the first time since I'd met him, Brad Mitchell looked genuinely defeated. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the expression of a man who'd finally encountered an opponent he couldn't manipulate or intimidate. What happens to Tyler if I give you what you want? That's not your concern anymore. Your concern is deciding whether you want to spend the next 20 years in and out of prison, or whether you want to accept responsibility for what you've done and try to build something legitimate with the rest of your life. Brad was silent for a long moment, weighing his options. Finally, he looked up at me with something approaching respect. You're not what I expected, Margaret. Most people would have just walked away after exposing me at the wedding. Most people don't have daughters they're trying to protect. And most people haven't spent 52 years learning that sometimes the only way to deal with bullies is to fight back harder than they expect. All right, he said finally. I'll tell you everything about Tyler's operation, but I want something in addition to the plea deal. What? I want to talk to Sarah. I want to apologize to her properly, not through lawyers or intermediaries. Just 5 minutes to tell her that I'm sorry and that none of this was her fault. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda. But for the first time since I'd known him, Brad Mitchell appeared to be telling the truth. I'll ask her, I said. But Sarah makes that decision, not me. If she says no, you accept it and move on. Agreed. I stood up and collected my folder. Detective Morrison will be in touch about the details. And Brad, if you're lying to me about wanting to change, if this is just another con to buy yourself time, I will make it my personal mission to ensure you never hurt another family. As I walked away, I heard him call after me, Margaret? For what it's worth, I think Sarah is lucky to have you as her mother. I didn't turn around to respond, but I found myself thinking that if Brad Mitchell really was capable of change, then maybe there was hope for everyone. The question was whether Tyler Reynolds would be as easy to stop, or if he'd prove to be even more dangerous than his now imprisoned partner. Chapter 9. Tuesday evening, Sarah and I sat in Victoria Ashworth's elegant living room, surrounded by family photos and expensive artwork, watching a woman's world collapse in real time. The introduction had been easier than expected. Victoria and I had mutual friends from the country club, and a casual mention of recent challenges with young men who aren't what they seem had opened the door to a deeper conversation. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. You're telling me that Tyler has been lying about everything? Victoria asked, her hands shaking as she reviewed the documents David Chen had provided. His job, his family background, his feelings for Emma? I'm afraid so, I replied gently. And more importantly, Mrs. Ashworth, we believe you were his ultimate target. Emma was just the access point. Victoria was an intelligent woman, retired college professor, active in community organizations, clearly nobody's fool under normal circumstances. But love, even secondhand love through a beloved daughter, could blind anyone to danger. Emma is going to be devastated, Victoria whispered. She's been talking about introducing him to me formally next weekend. She thinks he might propose soon. Sarah leaned forward from her place on the sofa. Mrs. Ashworth, I know exactly how she feels. 3 days ago, I was convinced I was marrying the love of my life. The humiliation is temporary, but the relief of discovering the truth before making a permanent mistake, that lasts forever. But how do we tell her? How do I explain that I allowed a stranger to investigate her boyfriend without her knowledge? That was the delicate part. Emma Ashworth was currently at work, unaware that her mother was learning about Tyler Reynolds' criminal history. According to David's surveillance, Tyler was planning to escalate their relationship this week, possibly proposing marriage as a way to accelerate access to Victoria's finances. We have a plan, I said carefully, but it requires your cooperation and Emma's presence here tomorrow night. I explained the strategy David Chen had developed. Rather than confronting Emma directly with evidence of Tyler's deception, we would arrange for her to discover the truth herself. Tyler would be invited to dinner at Victoria's house, where hidden cameras would record his responses to carefully crafted questions about his background. When his lies became obvious, Emma would see for herself what kind of man she'd been dating. It feels manipulative, Victoria said. It is manipulative, I agreed. But Tyler Reynolds has been manipulating your daughter for months. Sometimes the only way to expose a manipulator is to use their own tactics against them. Victoria studied the photographs of her daughter with Tyler, their faces bright with apparent happiness. What if Emma chooses to believe him over the evidence? What if she's too attached to let go? Sarah and I exchanged glances. Then you support her while protecting yourself, Sarah said. You can't force someone to see the truth if they're not ready, but you can make sure they can't use you to fund their delusions. We spent the next 2 hours planning the confrontation, going over questions and scenarios, preparing for various ways Tyler might respond when cornered. Victoria proved to be an excellent strategist, suggesting subtle traps that would expose his lies without seeming hostile or suspicious. He told Emma he graduated from Stanford with a business degree, Victoria said, making notes. But he's also claimed to have grown up in Boston. Stanford graduates usually mention their geographic displacement during college. I'll ask him about adjusting to California weather during his school years. Perfect, I said. David will have the recording equipment set up by tomorrow afternoon. Remember, the goal isn't to humiliate Tyler in front of Emma. It's to let her see who he really is. As we prepared to leave, Victoria caught my arm. Margaret, why are you doing this? You don't know us. Your daughter is safe now. Why risk getting involved in our situation? I thought about Brad's final words to me at the jail, about Sarah being lucky to have me as her mother. Because 3 days ago, I was a woman whose daughter had been manipulated into rejecting her family. Today, I'm a mother whose child came home safely. The difference was information, Mrs. Ashworth. The right information at the right time. And you think information will save Emma? I think information gives people choices. What Emma does with those choices is up to her. On the drive home, Sarah was unusually quiet. Finally, she spoke up. Mom, are you sure we're doing the right thing? This feels like we're playing God with people's lives. We're giving Emma the same gift someone gave us, I replied. The truth. What would you want someone to do if they knew your boyfriend was a criminal and you didn't? Sarah considered this. I'd want them to tell me, even if it hurt. Exactly. And after tomorrow night, if Emma chooses to stay with Tyler despite knowing what he is, that's her decision to make. But at least it will be an informed decision. As we pulled into our driveway, my phone buzzed with a text from David Chen. Reynolds just booked flights to Miami for this weekend. 2 tickets, he's planning to run. I showed the message to Sarah, who went pale. He knows something. Someone must have warned him. I thought about Brad sitting in his jail cell, potentially making phone calls to unknown associates. Or someone's getting nervous about their partner's arrest and deciding to cut their losses. Either way, tomorrow's dinner at Victoria Ashworth's house had suddenly become much more urgent. If Tyler Reynolds disappeared with Emma, it could be months before anyone tracked them down. By then, Victoria's fortune could be gone, and Emma could be trapped in an abusive relationship hundreds of miles from home. Change of plans, I said, reaching for my phone to call Victoria. We're moving the dinner to tomorrow night, and we're going to make sure Tyler Reynolds doesn't make it to that airport. As I dialed Victoria's number, I found myself thinking about how much my life had changed since Brad's cruel words 3 days ago. The woman who'd been told to disappear had instead become someone who refused to let other families face the same threats. And tomorrow night, Tyler Reynolds would discover that his luck had finally run out. Chapter 10. Wednesday evening. Victoria Ashworth's dining room looked like the set of a police sting operation disguised as a family dinner. Hidden cameras recorded from 3 angles while Detective Morrison monitored from the kitchen, and David Chen watched from his car parked strategically across the street. Emma had arrived 30 minutes early, nervous about introducing Tyler to her mother, but excited about their future together. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Tyler Reynolds was everything Brad had described. Tall, handsome, charming, with the same practiced smile and confident demeanor that had fooled my daughter for so many months. He brought flowers for Victoria and had clearly researched her interests, making knowledgeable comments about the art collection and asking intelligent questions about her late husband's work. So Tyler, Victoria said as we moved through the appetizer course, Emma tells me you're from Boston originally. That must have been quite an adjustment, moving to California for Stanford. Tyler didn't miss a beat. Actually, the weather was the easy part. Coming from New England winters, California sunshine felt like a gift. The real challenge was the cultural differences. West Coast business practices are much more casual than what I grew up with. Emma smiled proudly at her boyfriend's smooth answer. Victoria and I exchanged glances. Tyler had passed the first test, which meant he was either telling the truth about his background or he was an exceptionally skilled liar. What was your major at Stanford? I asked casually. My late husband always said their business program was top-notch. Finance with a concentration in international markets. I wrote my senior thesis on emerging economies in Southeast Asia. Tyler reached for his wine glass, completely comfortable with the line of questioning. Strike 2. According to David's research, the real Tyler Reynolds had never attended Stanford University. He was maintaining his lies effortlessly, even when given multiple opportunities to come clean. How interesting, Victoria said. My brother teaches economics at Stanford. Professor William Ashworth. You might have had him for one of your courses. For the first time, Tyler hesitated. It was barely perceptible. A slight pause before answering. A quick glance toward the exit. I don't recall the name, but it's a large university. Different departments don't always overlap. Emma jumped in to help. Mom, Tyler graduated 8 years ago. Professor schedules change all the time. But Victoria pressed gently. Oh, William's been there for 25 years. Department head for the last 10. Surely you would have encountered him if you were a finance major. Tyler's smile became forced. You know, I'm starting to feel like I'm being interviewed for something. Is there a reason for all these questions about my college experience? The tension in the room ratcheted up several degrees. Emma looked confused and embarrassed. Victoria maintained her pleasant demeanor, but I could see her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her water glass. I'm just making conversation, Victoria said. Getting to know the man my daughter cares about. Right, Tyler said, but his voice had an edge now. Well, maybe we could talk about something else? Emma mentioned you've been doing some traveling recently. It was a deflection, and a telling one. Tyler was trying to steer the conversation toward Victoria's activities and lifestyle, gathering information about her assets and vulnerabilities. Actually, I said, deciding to accelerate the timeline, I'm more interested in your travel plans. Emma mentioned you're thinking about a romantic getaway this weekend. Tyler's face went carefully blank. We've discussed it. Nothing definite. Miami's lovely this time of year, I continued. Great restaurants, beautiful beaches. Have you been there before? Emma turned to look at Tyler with surprise. Miami? I thought we were talking about Napa Valley for this weekend. Tyler's composure finally cracked. We discussed several options. I may have mentioned Miami as a possibility. When? Emma asked. We've been planning Napa for weeks. You even made restaurant reservations. Plans change, Tyler said curtly. Sometimes opportunities arise that require flexibility. That's when Detective Morrison chose to enter from the kitchen, his badge clearly visible on his belt. Excuse me for interrupting, he said politely. Mr. Reynolds, I wonder if I could have a word with you. Tyler stood up so quickly, his chair nearly fell over. I'm sorry, who are you? Detective Morrison, County Police. I believe you know my colleague Detective Parker from Miami. He's been looking for you regarding some financial irregularities involving elderly investors in Florida. Emma gasped. Financial irregularities? Tyler, what is he talking about? Tyler looked around the room, his escape routes cut off, his carefully constructed persona collapsing like a house of cards. This is entrapment. I haven't done anything wrong. Then you won't mind answering a few questions, Detective Morrison replied calmly. Starting with why you booked flights to Miami under 3 different names in the past 48 hours. 3 different names? Emma stood up, staring at Tyler with growing horror. Tyler, what's going on? Who are you? That's when Tyler made his final mistake. Instead of trying to maintain his innocence or explain the situation, he grabbed Emma's arm roughly and started pulling her toward the door. We're leaving, now. Don't listen to any of this, Emma. These people are trying to poison you against me. Emma jerked away from him. Don't touch me, and don't tell me what to listen to. She turned to face Detective Morrison. I want to know everything, right now. Over the next 30 minutes, Emma Ashworth learned that the man she'd been dating for 3 months was actually Thomas Mitchell, no relation to Brad despite the shared surname, a career criminal with outstanding warrants in 4 states. His job in investment banking was a cover for targeting wealthy widows and their adult children. His romantic feelings for her were entirely fabricated, designed to provide access to her mother's fortune. The Miami flights were your exit strategy, Detective Morrison explained as Tyler sat in handcuffs. After one final dinner with Mrs. Ashworth, you were planning to convince Emma to elope with you. The marriage would have given you legal access to family assets, and by the time anyone realized what had happened, you'd have disappeared with both Emma and her mother's money. Emma sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of her near miss. Victoria held her daughter's hand, both women crying tears of relief and residual fear. Mrs. Henderson, Detective Morrison said, as Tyler was led away, your cooperation has been invaluable. We've connected this case to similar operations in 6 other states. Your investigation may have prevented dozens of families from being victimized. As the police cars drove away and David Chen packed up his surveillance equipment, I found myself sitting in Victoria's living room with 3 other women who'd just experienced a life-changing revelation. Emma was embarrassed but grateful. Victoria was shaken but relieved. Sarah was proud but thoughtful. Mom, Sarah said as we prepared to leave, I keep thinking about something you said at the jail, about Brad being part of a larger operation. What about it? If Tyler and Brad were partners and they've been running cons in multiple states, how many other women are out there right now believing they're in love with men who are planning to destroy their lives? I looked at Victoria, who was comforting Emma, and thought about all the families who hadn't been lucky enough to have someone investigate their romantic predators. Probably more than we want to imagine. So what do we do about it? That question had been forming in my mind since the moment Brad was arrested. What did we do with the knowledge we'd gained? The network we'd built? The expertise we'd developed? We start a foundation, I said finally. A resource for people who suspect their loved ones might be involved with romantic fraudsters. Investigation services, legal support, emotional counseling, public education about the warning signs. Sarah smiled. The Margaret Henderson Foundation for Family Protection? I laughed. Nothing that grandiose. Maybe just second chances for families who need help starting over after discovering they've been victimized. 3 months later, Second Chances opened its doors in a modest office downtown, funded by the money I'd originally planned to give Brad and Sarah as a wedding present. We'd helped 12 families avoid romantic fraud schemes, provided counseling services to 37 victims of financial manipulation, and created an online database of known romantic predators that law enforcement agencies across the country now used as a reference tool. Sarah worked part-time for the foundation while rebuilding her marketing career. Victoria Ashworth served on our board of directors and helped fund our legal advocacy program. Emma had returned to teaching but volunteered on weekends, using her experience to help other young women recognize manipulation tactics. And me? I discovered that being told to disappear from someone's life had actually shown me how to make myself indispensable to the lives that mattered. The best revenge, as it turned out, wasn't a dish served cold. It was a life lived with purpose, protecting others from the predators who thought they could destroy families for profit. Brad Mitchell was serving 7 years for fraud and conspiracy. Tyler Reynolds got 12 years and deportation back to Canada, where he faced additional charges. Both men would be monitored for the rest of their lives, their criminal activities documented and shared with law enforcement agencies worldwide. Sometimes the perfect wedding gift isn't what the bride and groom expect to receive. Sometimes it's discovering who you really are when someone tries to erase you from existence. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person who disappears isn't the one who was asked to leave. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.